Well, as I used to say on Monty Python, now for something completely different. All right? We're going to move and we're going to talk about crisis, zombies, and social media. And hopefully you'll see how all these come together as I go through the presentation today. And yeah, luckily I'm not the one in criminal because you could actually make a lot of money if you found the other Timothy Coombs. He's worth a couple $100,000 in the United States on the bounty. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with telling you a short case. And this is the case. This is crisis preparedness. And you might wonder, how is this zombie crisis preparedness? Well, what happened was, in the United States, we found out that we're not really good at preparing for crises. When we ask our citizens to make plans for what you would do during a crisis, or to create kits so you'd be ready for a crisis, we found out no one was paying any attention to it. So what they did is they created the Zombie Apocalypse campaign. And this is where the social media part comes in. So we have a little bit about crisis, planning for disasters. We have our zombies coming in. And now we have social media. It's being used. They used some badges and buttons. They were trying to get the message out another way along the social media. And it also included a blog. And the blog was very popular. People would go to the blog and talk about preparing for the zombie apocalypse. The only problem was people would point out that nowhere did our Centers for Disease Control explain how to kill a zombie. And to which the CDC politely replied, well, we don't really want to kill zombies. We want you to prepare for what you might encounter if you did encounter what we would call the zombie apocalypse. And I don't know if you watch any zombie movies or watch the TV show The Walking Dead, but the zombies are out there, and they're going to spread, and they're going to spread everywhere. And are you ready for the zombie apocalypse? And truly, in the U.S., we have people who take this seriously. The CDC was not taking it seriously. The CDC was using this as a humorous strategy to get people to think about preparedness. Their point was, if you're ready for the zombie apocalypse, you're ready for a flood. You're ready for a hurricane. You're ready for a tornado. And that's how they were trying to break through, because they wanted people to get the message, because they have to know that the federal government can't be everywhere at once. And so there's going to be times they're on their own, and they're going to have to be ready for disasters. All right? What happened with the zombie apocalypse? Hugely successful in terms of at least increasing awareness. We don't really know about how many plans were created, but the CDC went from 3,000 visits to over 30,000 visits, and their Twitter followers jumped from 12,000 to 1.2 million. Something in zombies struck a chord, and it did get people interested in it. And the reason I'm saying it's the zombies is they were running the exact same type of program, using the same social media channels prior to that. The problem was they were using this man. And if Miliband was faded out greatly, he's not even a ghost. No one knows who he is. He was the head of Homeland Security, Tom Ridge, but his face was everywhere. He was on billboards. He was on newspapers. He was on television telling people to get prepared. And people ignored him. They're watching probably thinking, who is that guy anyway? They don't know. Barely 50% of the American public know who the vice president is. No one knows who this guy is. And so we see a shift in thinking because they saw it wasn't working, that there was value in the zombies. And what that really helps to illustrate is a point that many people miss, at least among my students. When we talk about social media, they think that social is a tactic. Well, it's not. The same way media is not a strategy. It's how you use it. You use media strategically. And in itself, it's simply a tactic. And what we need to start thinking about more in public relations, at least in the United States with social media, is we need to be thinking about message design. What is the message we're trying to get across? It's too often in class you ask students, well, what would you do? And they would say, I would use Twitter. It's like, well, why? What are you going to say in Twitter? What can you say in 140 characters that fits what you're doing? What's your objective? What are you trying to achieve? And in the end, there should be accountability, because PR practitioners in the United States are pressed more and more each year to show what is, and I'm going to use that word, return on investment. What are we getting? We're giving you money. What are you giving us back in terms of the organization? So they want to know, and we need to think about that, because what we've seen initially in the United States is that it wasn't taken that way in social media, that U.S. companies became scared. They heard there's social media out there, and they were all older. They didn't use it. They didn't know what Facebook was. They probably didn't know exactly what the term meant. So they started hiring all of our students to come run their social media programs. Our students would be put in charge of a social media program because they had a Facebook page. But they didn't know how to use it strategically because we hadn't gotten to that part yet. That part was left out. But now we're starting to build that in. And what I want to do is talk about this in terms of crisis. And I want to look at it from a pre-crisis phase. And that's partly in terms of preparation for events. So I'm going to talk a little bit about preparation and mitigation, going back to the zombies, with preparation and just kind of some concluding comments about that. So we'll be talking more here and coming back to the idea of the zombies as we link it into the idea of social media crises. And social media crises are concerns that either begin in or they become amplified throughout the social media and can harm the organization. And what I want to say today is the social media crises are potential zombies. They're zombies for organizations. And this is a different type of crisis than what we've been used to dealing with. In the past, what crisis management was built upon, beginning in the 80s, both in the United States and in Europe, is on operational threats. Something is going to stop my company from producing goods or delivering services. So that's what we were worried about. Well, now we're not. Now these social media crises are emerging. It's a new type. It's a little bit of a new world out there. So here are some of the parallels when we start talking about social media and zombies. They both spread by viruses. In the modern world, and we'll come back to this later, modern zombies are spread by viruses. All right? So are social media crises. They're spread like viruses. Zombies are going to eat your brains. If you're an organization, these zombies, they're going to eat your reputation. And we can say, well, reputation, I can't touch that. I can't feel it. Does it really matter? Well, it does. Deloitte just released a white paper this week. They asked executives across the United States, what is your primary concern? What is your major risk? 40%, the number one answer was reputation. And reputation risk is seen heavily linked now to what's happening in social media. That's where it can erode very rapidly for an organization. The problem is we don't have a very good understanding of it. But we should have. Here's a nice quote I like from a zombie movie where the guy is saying that, this is the part in the movie where the guy says, zombies, what zombies, just before they eat their brains. I don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that organization. You don't want to be that organization that said, reputation, social media, we don't need to worry about that. Everything will be fine. No, you need to start thinking about it. You need to think about prevention. How do we prevent these from occurring? But more importantly, you need to think about mitigating. How do we limit the damage being done by this? Because social media moves so fast. You're not going to be able to prevent a lot of these anymore. You can on the operational side. If I run a chemical manufacturing facility, I know what I can do to increase prevention. I don't know so much if I'm more on a consumer market side what I can do to prevent social media crises because I can't prevent some of them, but I can mitigate the effects that I might feel from them. Your first concern when you're faced with zombies is where are the zombies? Because you don't want them to get you. And this is where we need to start thinking, and we're seeing changing very, very rapidly that organizations are scanning social media for potential crises. And I'm going to get at some of the limitations that are going on so far. But you have all these new channels that keep appearing, and you have new tools for analysis that are out there. And you have new risks that are occurring, new challenges for preventative actions that are out there. But we are moving in this direction. But I want to spend a little bit more time about some of the other concerns along there. Because I want you to think about social media as risk. That these are both the actions of others and your own mistakes that are going to create risk for you. I get tons of email during the week trying to sell me on social media because I subscribe to some practitioner lists and you get white papers and you sign up and they get your email addresses. And they want to tell me about why my CEO should be on Twitter. They want to tell me what I can do with a Facebook page, why there should be a blog. Did I ever think about using Pinterest for my PR type of work? Well, there are downsides to these too. There are risks. So you have to think about that. There's advantages and risks. And I want to draw out some of the risk elements, but also return to some of the advantages here. When we look at social media crises, we can think of them as really what term a paracrisis. And this is where you're actually managing a crisis threat in public. And that's new. it used to be in crisis management, again, going back sort of the old paradigm, no one saw when I prevented a crisis. And I didn't tell anybody. You don't tell anyone when I almost blew up the nuclear reactor. You say, it's just another day, all right? So things are fine. Now you can't. This is being done in public on social media. So you have to decide whether you respond or not and how you're actually then going to respond to these crises that appear in social media. But as we look ahead, what are some of your intended effects when we're talking about crisis mitigation? Well, you want to reduce the reputational damage. You want to reduce anger and anxiety that might be created by these crises. We can talk about trying to preserve purchase intention. If you're customer driven, you're really worried that this is going to cost me sales. And we'll talk about some examples of that in a minute. You want to minimize media coverage, the amount and the duration. You don't want the media, the traditional media picking up on it, and you don't want the social media picking up on it. The ones that have been truly horrific social media crises just create this firestorm and keep snowballing and just kind of suck up a lot of your reputational capital. And then you want to promote acceptance of your crisis message. You need to get that message out. What is going on? What is my organization doing to address this situation to try and fix some of the problems that are starting to emerge out there? Again, also, sometimes you want to protect public safety, but that's usually minor. Most social media crises don't involve public safety because they're reputational, not operational in nature. So why the concern? Again, negative comments can damage your reputation, so you're a little bit worried. It's not that you're in high school and you're worried what your friends say about you on Facebook. This is you're worried what your customers are saying, what your investors are saying, what your employees are saying, what community members are saying about you. Those can impact you. And we know that, again, reputation is a very valuable asset that we're looking to preserve as an organization. And you do have these threats. You can have further negative messages. You can have financial loss as a result of this if things get too bad in terms of what you're doing here. And what this sets us up is to start thinking more sophisticatedly about social media crises, because that definition I gave you is far too general. What does that really mean? And if I'm going to approach it strategically from the point of view of a crisis communicator, I need a better idea what I'm facing. Just something that's amplified out there in social media? Well, we can do better than that. And this is my attempt to start doing better than that and looking at really the sources of social media crisis. And this comes from looking at all the lists of social media crises that get put out there. There's a book with 100, and you can find lots of lists. You put social media crises, and they'll give you a top 10, top 20, and you kind of look at them all together. And what I found is sources really come down to 3 points. There's dissatisfied customers, organizational misuse, and challenges. The challenges that appear. And I want to talk a little bit about each of these, give you examples, show you how they might threaten the reputation and where they are. So think about all these, that there are actually 3 different types of zombies out there. But they all want the same thing. They're all going to want your reputation through the social media crisis. And this is just another way of organizing it, ways of kind of bringing these lists together to see which come down to the 3 types here. So let's talk about some of these. So let's start with organizational misuse. This is your own fault, and this is part of the risk. You decide to go into social media, but actually you're not very good at it. Or you hire somebody, and they turn out not to be very good at it. And people get fired for this stuff. All right? Inappropriate. This is about competence, and that's important because you apologize and correct. And we know very strongly from crisis research across a lot of disciplines that when it's competence-based, an apology goes a long way to fix it. So you screwed up. Now, you can make it worse if it seems purposeful and it's misuse. If they think you're being purposely deceptive and really meant to do it, well, then it could be a moral issue and be a bigger crisis. And here's an example of organizational misuse. This is a headline that appeared in the news media, and this was widespread in the social media in the United States. American Apparel angers Twittersphere with Hurricane Sandy sale. They used the hashtag Hurricane Sandy when a very devastating hurricane had hit the East Coast. And all they wanted to do was advertise a sale that they were having at American Apparel. People found that to be very offensive, very inappropriate use. So American Apparel apologized and moved on. That doesn't help your sales. That actually hurts your sales. People were quite offended by use of American apparel. And while I appreciate that, yeah, sometimes you need to really kind of push the boundaries, know sometimes if you push them wrong, you're going to get a lot of blowback for it. Dissatisfied customers. This was very famous in the United States. But this is a delivery man, and he's throwing a package over the fence. It's a computer monitor. I think most of us would agree that's not the way to deliver a computer monitor, to throw it over the fence. And so then this might lead you to a loss of clients, as clients think, well, I don't want to ship fragile things by FedEx if this is how they handle the situation. And unfortunately for this delivery man, the person making the delivery to had a camera trained on his front gate and was able to capture all this on tape. This is customer relations. This is not really a crisis. You're going to resolve the concern and move on. That's consumer relations. Do you think FedEx had delivery problems before social media? Yeah, I think they did. I think they still have them today. This guy isn't one of them, though. He's now in the back room. They won't let him drive a truck anymore because of this, so they just kind of resolved and moved on. But these are the ones that then, this is where you get the idea, well, this is a crisis. Well, no, this is customer service. You fix the problem, it's going to be all right. But there is a crisis connection if this is actually a warning sign of product harm. Someone could be hurt from this. FedEx responded by having one of their top executives on the delivery side give a video apology, saying that this is not how they operate, this is not what they mean to do, this is not how they mean to treat their customers. What's interesting is if you've read in the customer service literature, if you go back, and there actually was this time before the internet, that what did you do with customer complaints? Some forward-thinking companies were actually taking their top complaints that customers had, publicly posting them in their locations, and then saying how they addressed the concern. That's what we have now. Social media allows you to do that. As we heard earlier, there's been a big shift over to using social media to do customer relations. So it's not a crisis. Yeah, a lot of people can see you screwed up, but it gives you a chance to work through it. The last one, this is the toughest, and the image here is from the detox campaign that Greenpeace is running against pretty much every large garment manufacturer in the globe. Whether you're in Asia, Europe, US, they've all been affected by this one. This is where your stakeholders claim that your organization is acting in an irresponsible manner, that somehow you're a bad company. Then they don't necessarily say you're doing it on purpose. Most of the time it's that you're now out of step with society. Society has changed, the organization hasn't. And Detox wants to remove certain hazardous chemicals from the garment process, mostly in the dyeing of textiles. This is a threat to your CSR claims, and nowadays a lot of organizations build a good chunk of their reputations around CSR. The latest data that the Reputation Institute put out this summer is estimating that probably somewhere around 40% of a corporation's reputation is actually CSR. That's the largest chunk. And it's starting to move ahead of financial reporting, which is quite amazing. So this is a threat to your company if a group can legitimately show they have reasons to think that you're acting in an irresponsible manner. And as a company, you have some tough choices to face here. You're going to have to decide what you're going to do. And there's a crisis connection when this is sustained and starts spreading pretty rapidly on you. Sometimes companies make changes. As I said, you name most of the major apparel manufacturers, Nike, Adidas, Puma have all changed. H&M, Marks and Spencer's, Zara have changed. Li-Ning has changed. I mean, it's quite a broad name that have changed. But there are other times you actually have to fight this. They could be asking you to do something as an organization you just can't or don't believe you should do. So that's why the challenges are a little bit more difficult, because you're going to have to do a lot more assessment about what this threat is. How bad could this zombie apocalypse actually be for you? All right. And so we found the zombies. Now we need to kill them. And I'll show you some real zombie killing things in just a moment. But this is the ones for the online zombies here. All right, we're going to just keep calm, carry on for all the British here, and you're going to kill zombies, all right? And I'm not going to go into detail on the table, but the table is use of strategy. How can we use communication responses strategically to achieve our objectives? And our objectives are to kill these online zombies. And so this is really sort of a way to summarize my previous talk about, sometimes you need to apologize, sometimes you make changes, sometimes you refute the changes. But it's the idea, the need to think about, what are we really doing here? I'm really afraid. I saw early on when they started talking about social media crises, someone who was an expert said, well, it's not time to think and plan. You just react. It's like, wow, that's dangerous. As one of the earlier speakers said, you still need to take time to decide. As an organization, you have that. And one of the things I tell organizations when I talk to them about social media crises is I know the first criticism you're going to receive, the first criticism you're going to get is you were too slow. Because you're an organization, you have responsibilities, you have to make strategic decisions. Someone who is attacking you online doesn't have that. They don't have those limitations. They can say and do whatever they want. They can put it out on Twitter, they can put it in their blog, they can post it on your Facebook page. But you have a different obligation and responsibility. So you will always be perceived as slow. And that's just a far too easy criticism. But I've been interviewed enough by the media, and I know that's what they want to hear. So I won't give them they're too slow routine. Are you sure they weren't too slow? I'm not going to criticize them on that. So in review, you're going to have to monitor social media now. It's great. It's a useful tool. There's a lot of positives of social media, but also know, again, I hate to be from the crisis side and the one screaming that always bad news, but there's a risk to it too. There's a risk to how you use it, and there's a risk how other people use it. But on the whole, it's going to be beneficial to you. But you better be monitoring what's going on out there. Consider the value in responding. You need to act on customer complaints. However, you do not respond to trolls. And that's a flame war. You don't need to get into that. There are thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out there who have nothing better to do than to sit at their computer screen and type really nasty things about you or your organization. You have a job. You have other things to do. You can't get into that type of battle. And so sometimes you don't engage, and not engaging is a legitimate strategy at times. You'll see it in PR. We always say, oh, you need to engage. You need to embrace them. Trolls don't want to engage. They don't want to be embraced. They want to create havoc. Don't get sucked into their little games there. But do correct factual errors. Try to get that across. And I don't mean being argumentative. I'm not talking about splitting hairs over interpretations. I'm saying if there's a factual error, make sure you correct it. If they say you have a facility and you're sourcing from some of these areas in Bangladesh and you're not, correct that. Don't let that stand. And review your social media efforts. What are you doing in social media? Keep track of all the different channels where your organization is. And as part of the crisis management team, you need to be looking over and seeing what they're doing. And just for preparation, something to think about. Social media gets disconnected from the crisis management plans. Most companies now have a social media plan. The social media policy should be integrated into your crisis management plan. And you should very clearly articulate who's going to run and how social media works during a crisis. And you should have your social media manager on your crisis management team. We like to list out what are the most common people on the teams. You used to never mention the social media person. They need to be there. They're going to have to be part of that integrated solution. You should have templates for social media. Templates began for the news media. Have them for social media as well. Have your tweets, have your posts, whatever you need ready there. Establish your presence. If you're active in social media, you can respond there. And spokesperson video. Make sure your spokesperson, if you're going to do a video, is good. Because if not, you're going to get the comments like you get on YouTube about how they hate that. Look at that person. Domino's Pizza had a situation where some employees appeared to, let's say, abuse food that they then sold to customers, to put it a polite way. Well, Domino's were hailed for, our CEO went on YouTube and apologized. Read the comments. Most of the people hated the video because he's reading from a teleprompter and he's not looking at the camera. They savaged him in their comments in terms of what was going on. So just in conclusion, social media, there's challenges and resources, particularly if you're looking at it from a crisis perspective, and that's kind of the way that I'm looking at it. And it's like zombies. Today's zombies are different from old zombies. If you go back to the old black and white zombie movies, they were created through voodoo and magic. Nowadays, they're viruses. And that's how we've seen a move from operational to reputational. These are a different variety of crises for a lot of the crisis managers that are out there. And some of our old practices have been slow to modify to them. And you do not manage like a zombie, all right? You can't lack strategy. Zombies don't have no strategy. You don't see zombies organizing when they attack. They just wander around and get their heads cut off, blown off, taken off with a chainsaw. And you can't ignore the social media. You can't pretend like it doesn't matter. No, it still does. And the key to both is a quick and offensive act. Because interestingly enough, the government has run simulations on how best to handle a true zombie apocalypse, and you have to get out there quick and fast and kill the zombies. That containment does not work. Ignoring zombies will not work either for those who are out there. And just as a parting word, you have weapons, you better know how to use them. And so here's different ways to kill zombies, and you can actually buy these online, these zombie killing axes. But for us, in the organization fighting social media, we have our tools for trying to fight and to kill our zombies. I'll end it there.